So happy to be here. My name is Rachel Murray. And just very quickly, what we do is we run events for women in tech and tech adjacent roles, and now all virtual. And we like to think we're a global company. And we also offer corporate training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my role with the company is more on the back end. I don't do the exciting stuff. I have other wonderful folks that do that on our team. And I'm so excited to be here and to talk with Lynnea and Carl. But before we get into that, I want to just do a really quick, just some logistics. So I just want to let everyone know that everyone will be muted during the introductory remarks and the moderated portion of this discussion, unless we call on you to ask any questions. And then after we hear from the panelists, I'll moderate a brief conversation with the group. Then we'll open it up to conversation with everyone. And then if you have any questions, just use the chat feature in Zoom or raise your hand. And for those who are joining by phone, just press *9 and I'll recognize you. And then when asking your question, just introduce yourself and your company. And just remember that this is a completely off-the-record conversation, safe space. So with that, I would love to introduce Lynnea Jones and Carl Reid. Lynnea, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you, Rachel, as well as Jennifer, as well as ITI for having us here for this conversation. Very exciting and very thankful for you all to host this. And so my name is Lynnea Jones. I am currently the acting ICCIO, or the Chief Information Officer of the intelligence community. I've been in that position since June 5th. And so I am the acting. My prior position was the Deputy ICCIO for a little over 2 years. And so I was asked to step in and be the acting since June. And so was graciously thankful to be able to do that and have the opportunity. My background and career, very excited about this. I'm a STEM person at heart. I love solving problems and love technology. I think it allows us to do so many things, and it's just an eye-opening experience. I am a intelligence careerist, as some people would say. And so I hail from the National Security Agency. And so prior to being in this position as the acting ICCIO and the deputy ICCIO, I was at NSA for many years. In the intelligence community as the part of the Department of Defense, and had many opportunities working on behalf of the community with NSA and traveling and living abroad. So very benefiting experience. And I promise you, it isn't a recruitment event for the IC. I myself came up as a math and computer science major many years ago. And so I know that's something we'll talk about. And so back in the day, before we had information technology, it was good old mathematics. You can never go wrong with math, right? And so I'm originally from the Maryland area. So this is local home for me. And so again, thankful to be here.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. We talked a little bit yesterday, so impressed. Follow that, Carl.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to follow that. My goodness. So Carl Reid, I'm the executive director of the National Society of Black Engineers, and we are one of the largest student-governed societies based in the United States. We were founded in 1975 by 6 students who attended Purdue, all of whom were from the South Side of Chicago, who wanted to share the success that they had from turning around an 80% dropout rate in 1971 with Black students to a 60% graduation rate by 1975. And so what was the Society of Black Engineers became the National Society of Black Engineers when they invited 34 colleges to come and to share. So we've been around 45 years. I got my, and I'm a product of the organization, which is why I started with the organization. So I'm a math, science guy, engineering. My dad introduced me to engineering when I was 5 and had me say Massachusetts Institute of Technology when I was 3. He never finished college. He went to Hampton 2 years and dropped out and joined the Navy. And here I am with 2 degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Material Science and Engineering. So building the pipeline is really, I exemplify that as well. After earning my degrees, I went to work for IBM for 6 years in systems engineering and marketing, and then I worked in a couple of software companies for another 6 years until I got awakened. I got woke and found myself going back into higher education. I got back to MIT to run the Engineering Outreach Programs Office, where we had a pipeline of programs from middle school to high school and others. Took a huge pay cut to do that, but I never looked back. And while there, I earned a doctorate in education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education with a focus on Black males in higher education. Worked for the United Negro College Fund as their chief academic officer for 5.5 years. And then 2014 is when I became the executive director from NSBE. So those of you who are old heads among us, we talk about welcome back Cotter, that's me. And those of you who young people don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it.
That was incredible. I'm literally humbled to know you both. So thank you for that. That's incredible. You know, it's funny. One of the first questions we have is, how did you come to assume the leadership role in your organization? I think you touched on that by talking about your career path, but maybe you can talk a little bit more specifically on how that actually came to be. And I'll just put myself on mute, and either one, go for it.
Sure. So at the National Security Agency, I actually started as a system administrator. And so I worked my way up through management and leadership, becoming a technical director. So leading projects, leading teams, and eventually being part of the leadership team for organizations. And so very hierarchical part of defense. And so that's how I really came into, you could say, where I am today. I think working as a CIO, it's a blended background of understanding our relationships amongst each other, whether it be working with other agencies or elements, as well as working with industry. We have a lot of industry partners and partnerships, understanding contracts, understanding broad scale IT, so more of, as opposed to tactical, getting to the strategic aspect of things, because we're looking at technology implementation for not just the near term, say 3 to 5, but 5, 10, 15 years and abroad. And so I would think that the building blocks of understanding things, of how things work together, how teams work together, how we work together as far as people, gave me the foundation to be where I am today. In the intelligence community, it's 17 IC elements. They're very different as far as their mission set, but they're all valuable and we all need them to work together. And so the aspect of diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of background just enriches the intelligence and enriches our work and what we provide and what we do.
Yeah, and I think that it sounds like Lynnea talked about sort of the progression, and that was a little like me, except that it was also kind of herky-jerky. And I think that the critical pivot occurred when I was working for IBM in 1990, and I've always dreamed of working for a company in IBM. When I was in 11th grade, during a vision exercise, I wrote myself sitting behind a desk that said IBM. So, you know, here again, another 3 letters, right? MIT and IBM. But I think it was my mother-in-law sent my wife the book Savage Inequalities by Jonathan Kozol. And we had been doing youth work with church and mentoring informally. And I read the book. I wasn't a reader at the time. And it just angered me that this book, which really explains vividly the disparities in the United States, the educational disparities within proximity of each other. So you got Riverdale in New York and the Bronx, and you see the difference in education. And I just remember reading that, saying, this is 1991 thereabouts, and I had been working for IBM in 6 years. I said, I got to do something about it. And it took me 7 years to leave industry to go to work for MIT, to go back. It took me another 3 years to start a doctoral program, which took me 6 years to complete because I did it part-time. And then just finally going to United Negro College Fund, which is the fulfillment. One area I missed was I was promoted to an associate dean and director of undergraduate education at MIT. and the director of Office of Minority Education. So I've always had this passion to sort of lift as I climb. And once my passion and my competency, what Ken Robinson calls the elements came together, it was just the fulfillment of those things. So NSBE is an important part of that path. But like Lynnea, I'm starting to see this broader community now that's in need of these conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and how do we do that? How do we, that engineering mindset, how do we operationalize this so that we can see the results? Because it's years in the making, so it's going to be really years to unmaking, as it were. And that's where we're starting to think about the future. But yeah, that's how I came to where I am.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. That is fascinating. I would love to ask, are there any STEM skills that you currently use in your position now?
Sure, so absolutely. And so, as Carl was speaking and Rachel, as you were just recapping, I would say one thing that I always emphasize to people, I am a big risk taker. And so I don't know if I seem conservative, but I have never turned down an opportunity or a job, whether it be abroad, because I always felt like I could always go back to the previous position, but the opportunity may never present itself again. And so my career path has jumped around similar to Carl's in different aspects because I'm all about trying new things. When you ask about the STEM skills that we use on a day-to-day basis or areas that are important, I always go back to the basics such as problem solving, critical and analytical thinking, being able to think outside of the box, being able to take risks. I go back to those foundational aspects because it's really about being able to analyze data information, whether it be at a small or a larger scale, and really repeat those processes. We're always looking at how can you view the problem. If you think about when you're solving a problem at home, there's multiple ways that can be solved, right? But when you look at it from whether a technology aspect or a business aspect, factors come into play such as the return on investment, or maybe the financial benefits or gains, or maybe it could be cost prohibitive to do something a certain way. What's the time and expediency with solving a problem one way over the other? What's the resources that it may take? Is this something you can do alone, or do you need a team of people, or would it require some sort of specialization? So I don't see that any different in day to day. I think we're all trying to do the best that we can and solve problems. And I'm all about, trying your best and doing your best and working together. I think teamwork is a big aspect of it. And so when people ask, sometimes you'll get questions about what's the perfect major or what should I pursue. I encourage people to do what you enjoy. And when it comes to the STEM background, there is no right or wrong path. We're all colleagues and we all could have different avenues and still be at the same table. So I encourage people to think broadly, but do something you enjoy. Don't do it for, as some people will say, do it for the money or do it for that. Do it because you enjoy it. I enjoy solving problems. I'm excited about it. And I just happen to be in a position that I get to do it for a living.
Yeah, I think I agree wholeheartedly. I just could say, check. I think when they talked about the critical thinking, analytical reasoning, problem solving, that I apply regardless. And I just, remember problem sets, sitting down, doing problem sets in physics or in mechanics or whatever. And it just, you presenting with the problem, you break it down in small parts, you understand what the assumptions are, and you work to solve it, and you apply theories and to understand it. And you don't leave until you really solve that problem. And so that's the other thing that I've picked up is that grit, that perseverance, that work ethic. I think it was Will Smith who said that, I'm not the most talented actor, but one thing I'm going to beat everybody on is just is work ethic. He says, I'm going to die on that treadmill. So I think that's really what I walked away, whatever it takes, attitude. The The other thing is later in life, I became a product manager for software companies. And so learning how to manage cross-functionally and manage sort of end-to-end process, beginning with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey talks about in 7 Habits, and just kind of working your way backwards, just making sure that there is a path to get to that end, so the blueprint. So those are the skills that I carry forward every day. I don't really know what a differential equation looks like anymore, but those critical thinking skills that we just talked about are critical in our day-to-day.
I could not agree more. It's so interesting how STEM is really, I mean, it is just absolutely key to evolving and to being successful and to leadership skills. So yeah, you nailed it. So now that the digital divide and tech equity has been further exposed due to the coronavirus, what are the ways tech companies can help in this new normal, which I have to put it in air quotes. I'm already hating that phrase, new normal, but here we are.
You want me to go? Or
yeah,
you...
Carl, Carl.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll switch because I can't. Following you is very difficult. Yeah, we saw it play out. I didn't mention this, but we have 21,000 members, over 13,000 of whom are college students, and another roughly 4,000 pre-college students, 3rd to 12th graders, and then the rest are professionals out of our 21,000. And so the college students were really hit hard during the COVID crisis. So March, we started to get emergency requests from students, and the requests were not large, $200, $300, $500, so that they can get off campus, so that they can get equipment, because these colleges quickly, over a course of a weekend, switched to online learning. And many of our students did not have that. So we had immediately 140 members requesting just $60,000 in emergency aid, which fortunately we were able to raise and distribute to them. But there'll be more. There'll be more of this as the reality hits for a longer period of time. So this summer, we typically run a program called the Summer Engineering Experience for Kids, the SEEK program for 3rd to 5th graders. It's a free 3-week program in cities around the country. Since 2007, we've reached 25,000 kids. And of course, we had to go virtual, but we wanted to rely on them to have the equipment. So we partnered with Amazon with some funding from Honeywell. We built a new curriculum for our program, and Amazon was gracious enough to load the curriculum on 1,300 tablets and mail them out to kids in 3 different countries who participated. So we had 1,300 kids participating in this synchronous/asynchronous program during the course of summer. And so now I'm asking the question, there are 658,000 African-American 8-year-olds in the United States. Why not look at that? How can we get to scale? And companies like Amazon and Intel and others have really done the scale thing. They've solved the scale problem. They may not have translated that into education and closing the digital gap, but we've been doing that. You've been doing that, Rachel, in your organization, and we've been doing that. So our issue is, how do we apply our knowledge to their knowledge of scale and close that gap? And that's what keeps me up at night.
Thank you.
Awesome, that's really exciting. I would say within the intelligence community and just working with our partners in general, how we plan and will continue to close the digital gap that has probably just become more profound right now is just with continuing those partnerships and relationships. If you kind of think back around 5 to 10 years ago, with just the rise in technology, we started to see us using tech in a different way. At that time, it was more of the rise of the cloud, big data, large scale data sets, in technology and in companies and within the agencies. Around 5 years ago, we started to see the role of, say, the chief data officer, or say, if you think about roughly 10 years ago, we didn't have a chief technology officer and those type of aspects. And so people were starting to recognize the power, the influence, the ability and the importance of technology and how it was becoming not just a service provider or enabler, but something that was necessary in order to to understand a larger ecosystem, right? And so that progression just seems to have increased. And I think with coronavirus, whether it be this, you can see more of, not, I don't want to say a reliance, because I would hope that we have a balance with technology, but just the use of it to help it. I see it every day. I mean, now with something as simple as menus are no longer, at paper, using your phone to display a menu, or how can you access data and information through a computer or a device in order to do banking or, telehealth, telework, those concepts were very more cutting edge. And I think with coronavirus, it's now become more acceptable. As you said, the phrase of new normal, if you would have said 5 years ago, if you would have said a year ago, what's coronavirus, I wouldn't know what coronavirus is, but just the propagation of data and information and the speed at which it reaches us today and the amount of data we're producing, I think coronavirus has really brought that into more of focus, because people are seeing what is possible to be done from your home or from your car, or how you can use data and information in order to enable for just day-to-day activities. So I think that those are the positives. I like to look at this as a moment for innovation, as opposed to, of course, we know that the pandemic and what some of the challenges it's caused, but this is also a great opportunity for us to gain insight and leverage tech in a way that we had not before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think about that all the time, how this moment is just, necessity is the mother of invention. It's amazing to see how much that's changed. And Carl, thank you for bringing up the inequities that are appearing also, and how companies are really working hard to make it less so. And relatedly, I'd love to hear about the gaps that you see in your particular sectors, and how tech companies can really help. And Carl, why don't you start us off again?
Yeah, I started to respond to the question in the chat about this. We see sort of 5 areas of gaps. One is awareness, making sure that young people are aware of the opportunities that exist. Not a lot of young people sort of interact with those who might look like them, like Lynnea and others who can inspire them. 2, access to high quality learning, STEM learning experiences, both in school and out of school. And I'm struck, we've been doing the SEEK program for now 13 years, and there's still communities that just don't even, in the cities we're running, don't even know about it. 3, identity. Helping young people see themselves as future, much like, I saw myself as an engineer because I loved trains at that time. 4 is confidence, because a lot of people have all those other things, but don't have confidence. And so they hit a wall, they have that first problem set, they have that first math exam, and then they run away to do something else. And then 5 is just proficiency. So just making sure that really have the proficiency. So what can the sector do to really address that? It's progressive experiences that young people can have in order for them to build the confidence. Having success breeds success, but success also breeds confidence. So the more sort of efficacious, the more success experiences young people have is key. And I just a quick story. We distributed these tablets, and I happened to run into a neighbor who I told about the program. She went online and registered for her. I think she's an 8-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old daughter. And 3 weeks into the program, I saw her walking around the street with a tablet. And her mother says, she doesn't leave this. She walks around with this thing. And they were going to the store to get some bridge building materials for one of the activities. And so just having access and opportunity builds us confidence. And I would ask that the tech companies think about organizations like NSBE. We have 13,000 who can come to our conferences every year. Now we've gone virtual, so it's roughly 8,000 or 9,000 so far. But this is a target-rich environment for companies to come and to participate and actively engage with our members. A couple of years ago, Northrop Grumman hired, it was quite a few, it was under 100, under 200, just under 200 people just at our conference alone. So there have been companies that have had success, just a matter of engaging.
Thank you. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So that's now I feel like Carl, because it's hard to follow that. That was such a well thought out answer, right? So whereas I'm very spontaneous, I was like, wow, I looked at the chat and I was like, gosh, she's made a list already. No, that's awesome. So I'm going to just elaborate on that because I thought that was great. I agree. I think representation, as Carl mentioned about the awareness and seeing yourself, I think representation is important. I think it's a partnership, right? So I think it values in seeing someone that you can identify, that you can look like yourself. We're all humans, and so that human instinct is very important. A partnership, I think that when we talk about the gap, there's different ways to view problem sets. And so, looking at it from like an analytical, critical thinking background, we look at gender gaps, we look at gaps as far as not just diversity, but gaps as far as gender, male and female, and then generational gaps as well. If you think about the work sector right now, we were just speaking about this a few days ago, that we have a work sector where we have as many millennials as we could possibly have baby boomers simultaneously working in the work environment. And so when you have age gaps of 30 and 40 years, there's different experiences that we've went through. You think of individuals who are coming to the workplace now that are kind of raised in the frame of Facebook or social media, whereas I didn't think about it of, them not knowing a world prior to that, or knowing a world without, say, social media, that social influence, or the ability to be able to Google everything. If you think about, having encyclopedias that you don't even see. I remember Britannica used to be this instead of encyclopedias, and you would look everything up, and now those are like relics. They're words of the past. And so when we talk about the divide, one area I like to impress upon is the allyship and advocacy and working together as partners, especially say in government. It's working together as a team and seeing the value of diversity as far as it improving the overall, not just workplace in general, but what the mission provides and what you're producing for your customers, because it enriches the data. It allows for difference of thought, and it allows for you to consider opportunities or consider questions that may not be thought of in the past. It kind of inhibits that group think or that group theory. So I think that's very important when you look at if you have a scenario where many people are the same, then it's a likelihood, again, prob and stat, because Carl was talking about diff EQ earlier, or diff equations, and this is kind of math geeking out a little bit. But anyhow, if you think about the prob and stat aspect, the larger your sampling size, the more varied your responses will be. And so that's what you want to get the best out of business and to get the best results for the employee, for your customers, for the team, for everyone.
I'm like nodding my
head. Can I just
Please.
throw something in to add Lynnea's point? I was on a panel on Monday, and the CEO of Oracle, Safra Katz, said this to your point, and put a point in this. She says, homogeny is the enemy of innovation. And she makes a case that where this is meta-T effect, right? Where there's a diversity, not just of thought, but you have to bring your whole self into the diversity in order to influence the diversity of thought. What Scott Page talks about, identity diversity, that's really when innovation occurs, when you bring that. So I love that quote, and I would love to share it with others. Homogeny is the enemy of innovation.
I love that so much. And I also want to highlight, Carl, the fact is 13,000, you said? Was that right? 13,000 members as part of?
Yeah, 21,000 in total, but 13,000 collegiate members.
So that's incredible.
As well.
That's incredible, because when you talk about the pipeline, you hear a lot of companies say, oh, there's a pipeline problem. And I think that your organization is negating that as a concept. Like, it's just not true. So just wanted to call that out. So thank you. I would love to hear from both of you also, and then we'll get to a little bit of individual questions. And I'm noticing the time already. So it's, wow, we're like cruising through. Can you share your experience as a person of color? What pathways did you see that were in your personal journey that provided you with a foundation for a career in STEM? And maybe Lynnea, we'll let you start this time.
Sure. So I'll be honest, as a pathway in STEM, it's not traditional, of course. You don't have many women in STEM traditionally. I say now, of course, we're trying to improve that and increase that, and especially as a woman of color in STEM. And so I always tell people, I'll be honest, growing up, I was the kid who took everything apart and wanted to know how it worked. And I'm thankful that I had a parent, my mother was very patient with me and, allowed me to take things apart and see the insides. And as opposed to, maybe stifling that, encouraged it and was probably as surprised as any parent would be as the fact that I wanted to understand how something worked on the inside, but I was someone who liked to take things apart. And so that just really continued. I was someone who enjoyed numbers. I like puzzles and problems, right? And so there's a lot of statistics that talks about how when your brain is forming and you're learning in early childhood, that you can nurture those activities. And I love puzzles. I love problem solving. I love to be able to do those things and find the answer. And I think if you culminate that with the hard work and the ethic, as Carl spoke about, and that tenacity and that understanding of there's a ton of quotes about failure, right? Embracing failure and trying again and continuing as opposed to giving up, and that piece, that aspect. That's really how I came about. I can remember going to local schools and doing the math problems and wanting to do all as opposed to every other one, or getting excited about learning about calculus, if you can believe that, and those type of things, and problem solving, and then the disciplines of math and the aspects of it. And so I think it's very important to cultivate those skills. I think it's important to ask why things work the way they do, or why things operate the way they are. And I think that really does start at the younger ages, because it's hard to embrace a concept if we don't encourage that and nurture it at a younger age. Then people may be less likely to want to pursue those disciplines because they're not something that are the norm, especially once you start to get into understanding the higher level disciplines of STEM when it comes to science and technology. And so that's why one reason I'm very passionate about telling about my background and how I came about, and encouraging people to don't be shy or don't be scared or I would say unable to embrace technology and math. Of course, in any aspect, everything seems daunting, but it's broken down into smaller parts. And that's one of the benefits of mathematics or technology. It's foundational. So they all build upon each other. And so that's what I tell people, just like a building, it all starts with a certain, one brick or concrete, and it makes, a large item, but it all starts with a single piece.
First of all, you are just, an honorary member of She Geeks Out, because obviously you're a geek like all of us. And secondly, just very quickly, I had like a flashback to high school, because I loved calculus in high school. And I remember asking the teacher why this was the way it was. And she was terrible though. She always said, I don't know, that's the way it is. So I never picked up on it, but I'm glad that you probably had better teachers. Okay, we all have our journeys. Carl, please.
Yeah, to Rachel, I had a love for math. I think because there was a problem, an effort, and an outcome. I don't have a love for art because there's no problem, effort, and outcome. Like you can continue working on that. I'm just kidding. But I like Lynnea used to tear apart my toys. And it was just curious, how do they operate? And my, dad handed me down a Lionel train set, and so just used to play around with that. And then we graduated to go-karts. We would build these wooden go-karts in the basement, and from there we moved to mini bikes. and we didn't have a lot of money, so we would just kind of slap together pieces that we could find, and engines without brake and on a frame without brakes. That's really what we did. So I was really fortunate that I had a chance to go to a magnet high school. And this was an exam school in Long Island, Tresper Clark High School. My brother went as well. And that really was great because we didn't have the resources to go to a private school or anything like that. But this really launched me. I took electronics, and then I was introduced to computer science. So just learning how to program in BASIC and Fortran, and getting that and building the confidence. So I think those are the key factors. It was just the curiosity that I had, and like Lynnea said, I had a dad who just fed that curiosity. When I told him how much I loved trains, every chance I got on the Long Island Railroad with him or the subways in New York, and would sit in the first car to look out the window to see what was happening. And he would explain things to me. So he just fed that curiosity as well, and that ultimately led to where I ended up. So what we're trying to do, Rachel, real quick, is just take that episodic experience that I had with a very fortunate nuclear arrangement, and bring it to scale. That's exactly what we're trying to do with the Summer Engineering Experience for Kids, our 225 NSBE Junior chapters around the world, and then collegiate chapters and others. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Take that experience and bring it to scale.
I love that. And you know what I'll do is I'm going to switch the questions around because I think this is related. Can you talk a little bit more about NSBE's 10-year strategic plan to produce 10,000 Black engineers annually by 2025 and how it's going?
Yeah, just real quick. When I joined as executive director in 2014, we saw that there was a declining share of degrees awarded to Black engineers in the United States. So at that point, the American Society for Engineering Education said that only 3.5% of bachelor's degrees awarded in 2014 were awarded to African Americans, and for a population made up about 12–13%. And so, and the numbers were declining. From 2003, it was 5.3%. So, and our mission is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers. So we're losing out not only on the numbers, but the share. So we set this bold goal, 10-year strategic goal, to work with colleges and universities to nearly triple the number of engineers they graduate every year, from 3,500, which is what was happening in 2014, to 10,000 annually by 2025. And we're well on our way. We have 5 years left, and we've seen a 45% increase in the number of degrees awarded. So there's just over 5,000 now who earn degrees in engineering in the United States. It's only bumped us up to 4.2%. But, so we've got some ways to go. And part of the strategies I talk about, expanding the pipeline, improving retention, and then increasing workforce readiness. Those are the ways, and getting those to scale is key to the fulfillment of our goal.
Thank you so much for sharing. Let us know how we can all help, because it's great.
Thank you.
Lynnea, I want to switch to you. Can you talk a little bit about how the federal government work with organizations like Carl's can provide insight into the skills needed to compete for public sector tech jobs, and also positions at companies that will continue to have America leading other countries in technology?
Sure, and absolutely. And one example is being here today, right? So we in the intelligence community, we're personally involved in outreach activities. I believe I'm actually going to be at NSBE when they have a upcoming forum. And so we have quite a few seniors that are volunteering to speak about the partnership of working in the federal government between organizations such as NSBE as well as others. There's a lot of internships, there's a lot of co-ops, we have work study programs. So let's talk a little bit about how that's broken up. The intelligence community is 17 agencies, Some are parts of other departments or elements of others, such as the services. Each have an IC portion, but we also have the larger elements which you typically hear about, such as the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the National Reconnaissance Organization, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I think I did all 5 there, right? So that's the big 5. And so with those, and then you hear about the FBI and other elements and aspects, and I don't want to go through and name them all, but because they have different missions and functions and responsibilities, they have different partnerships, and of course they're headquartered in different places. So we do partner with industry and organizations for career fairs, for events, for recruiting events. In some cases, we will have events with local universities. So a lot of times you'll see now a lot of the IC has moved, of course, with COVID-19 to a lot of their events being virtual. So a lot of virtual events are going on. In some cases, they're IC-wide, like sitting from the IC Office Director of National Intelligence where I sit. So we work with all 17. So some events will be hosted from the ODNI level, and some events will be hosted at the agency or the elemental level. But we are constantly working to improve that because we know that this is what's necessary in order to really provide the best security, national security for our current and future problem sets. And so we want to be equipped to have the next generation of engineers to solve these or help be a part of solving these hard problems that have to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning and 5G and where technology is going. And so in order for us to solve those problems, we need engineers and scientists and mathematicians and analysts to be able to understand that information and work together. So those are some aspects, but it's really an ongoing event. I would say probably day to day, there's a ton of events and people are looking to outreach. In some cases, we're contacted directly. We go through our strategic communications office, but we pretty much are always looking to increase the partnership and look for different avenues and ways to improve recruitment and ultimately broaden the workforce and strengthen the workforce.
Ooh, that's a lot. Thank you. Carl, back to you. And I've just got a few more questions. And then if anybody listening would like to ask any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your virtual hand and we'll be sure to unmute you. But Carl, speaking of recruiting, can you talk about your experience working in the tech sector? How would you describe any changes in the recruitment of diverse candidates from where you sit now?
Yeah, it's much harder. So I remember sitting in the interview with IBM, and I had to take some sort of a cognitive test, a written test. Now, I'm terrible at taking tests and terrible at formal tests. I mean, if I share with you my SAT scores, you'd be like, how did he get where he's going? Because SAT doesn't do a good job of predicting success for African Americans and others. At least that's my argument. And so I remember them having me take this test, and then they came back and said, well, you didn't do this that well, but your other credentials are pretty strong, so we're going to hire you. I mean, they basically made a conditional hire. And I understand that the tests are even more difficult now. These kind of stand-up coding exercises that many companies really celebrate. And that's fine if you had those experiences and you're comfortable with it. Even if you have the knowledge, if you're not comfortable with it, you'll have sort of an emotional response, a stereotype threat, as Claude Steele talks about, that will suppress your ability to cognitively be free. Whether you're African American, you're a woman, you're whatever, where there's a negative stereotype associated with that. So I think that the barriers are even higher, and it's unfortunate as well. So look at the statistics. NSBE has, when I started here, 7% of the undergraduates are majoring in computer science. Today, 15% are majoring in computer science. So that's 6 years later, and another 6% are majoring in computer engineering. So combined, that means that that's the #1 degree offered. And yet, if you look at the tech community more broadly, 1%, 2% as well. Now, I know that you're comparing graduates versus workers, but that's unacceptable because of those hoops that they have to jump. So I just think that we've got to do a couple of things. Now, I will say quickly that I give a shout out to Google. They've been trying all kinds of things. Howard University West, where they established on the West Coast a hub for HBCU students, historically Black colleges and universities, to get the training so that they could be ready for those entry-level jobs. They were putting Googlers in schools to help to teach and to influence the curriculum, and et cetera. That's really what's needed. You really have to insource. UPS is very good at this, right? Instead of just outsourcing, they insource. They bring their logistics into an organization. And that's really what's needed for organizations to really eliminate or reduce these barriers to entry that don't really tell anything about grit and perseverance and resilience, et cetera, that many of these students have.
I cannot agree more. I have lots of thoughts on recruiting as well, but this is not for me, so this is for you.
You should ask.
One final question for Lynnea. Would you please describe for us, what is the organization Women of Color and what is your relationship with it?
Sure. So Women of Color magazine, so they're part of a group called CCG, the Career Communications Group, CCG, and how I came to learn about the Women of Color magazine and the organization was a few years ago. I found about the BEA conference, which was the Black Engineer of the Year Awards. And so I started becoming involved in BEA. I spoke on panels. We would go to the events. I went on behalf of NSA as well as OD&I and other elements as just a broader part of the intelligence community to talk about background in fields in STEM and the IC writ large, if you would. And so that's how I found out about the Women of Color magazine and the organization. So they host events throughout the year for networking, for opportunities, information sharing, training, tons of forums in that aspect. And that's how I really got involved. And so that's where that came from.
Very cool. Thank you so much. We have one question so far, so please feel free to ask others. One question from Esmita asks, what can corporates do to support encouraging minorities to join STEM fields? Can you provide some action items for companies? Either one, I think this is.
Yeah. Yeah, I will, I'll throw out this, find out successful programs that already exist. And again, I keep kind of emphasizing this word scale because, in the course of a summer, we could reach 1,500 students and we're only limited by the funding. That's it. We have a platform that's scalable. So when we had in-person summer programs, we fund these programs about $1,000 per kid in cities and low-income communities, and they get 3 weeks experience. We evaluate them in the very beginning of the program and then the end on their math proficiency, science proficiency, engineering knowledge, motivation, and engineering identity. And we find market changes in those kids from the beginning to the end. And we actually have college students teaching them. So we train the college students so they could see themselves as part of this effort. So just a shameless plug, if you can help us get to scale for the summer engineering experience, we could probably knock off a number of these. And we raise about $1.7 million a year for this program to provide this free opportunity. And we're in Compton, we're in the south side of Chicago, we're in Detroit, we're in the hood in these programs. Secondly, Honeywell started to do this, where they started to identify where NSBE junior chapters were in their area of operations. And so they provided a fund that allows NSBE junior chapters to apply so that they can expand the services to local students. Some of these chapters have 350 kids, but on average, they're about 60, 70 young people, 3rd through 12th graders that are part of this. And then they have year-round programs. So once they finish SEEK, we plug them into NSBE Junior, and then once they finish NSBE Junior, they plug them into a collegiate chapter as well. My counterparts, Society Hispanic Professional Engineers, Society of Women Engineers, we all have similar models as well. So it's not just this, but really it's about scale. It's about helping us get to scale.
Thank you for sharing. Lynnea, do you want to add anything to that? No pressure if you don't.
Sure. No, so just quickly, I would just say, I mean, Carl really captured mostly all of it. I would say one thing that just because you may have not started in STEM early on does not mean that you cannot enter into STEM later on. A lot of times we will see cross-training programs in the intelligence community where we'll have arts or humanities majors that are now interested in becoming a part of STEM fields. And so I would say just be open to opportunities and partnership and look for those critical thinking, problem solving, analytical skills that can be present in other disciplines as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, Carl, did you want to say something? No, you're good. All right, well, that was the only question. I just want to, I don't know if Jennifer, you wanted to end with in any particular way, but I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer and ITI, for putting this on. Thanks to the participants who were able to join. And Lynnea and Carl, I want you to be my new best friends. It's going to be weird. So, but we really appreciate it, the time and all of your energy and efforts to this really important work. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day and week and weekend.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Carl.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Just want to say appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, likewise. And please stay in touch. I put my email address in the chat, so please do stay in touch. We really we can only do this through collective impact. We can only really move the needle through collective impact. So so please stay in touch, Rachel. I'd love to find out more about some of your work as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.